My in-laws threw me a baby shower, but when I walked into the venue, a huge banner read, "Farewell Party." On the table, a signed divorce paper and my luggage waited for me. My husband coldly said, "Your job is done. Leave now." But I smiled and whispered, "Then let's start the real farewell party." And that was the moment their nightmare began. The town of Willowbrook preserved the charm of America's good old Midwest. Main Street was lined with red brick buildings, many of them family businesses that had been passed down through 3 generations, while expansive, upscale residential areas stretched behind them. Getting married in the church with the town's tallest spire was every local girl's dream. Emma Carter had once been one of those dreamers. Emma met her husband, James, at a local arts festival. She was volunteering, teaching art to children, while James was there for his family's real estate company's promotional activities. To Emma, who had just graduated from art school, James seemed like the ideal man, combining urban sophistication with small-town sincerity. As they dated over weekends, she began to notice that his family name was engraved all over town: Carter Library, Carter Park, Carter Memorial Hospital. The town's development had progressed alongside the Carter family history. "My family might be a bit old-fashioned, but they'll surely like you," James told her on the night he proposed. However, reality proved far harsher than his words suggested. The Carter mansion stood majestically on a hill in the suburbs. The 3-story Victorian mansion, with its ornate decorations, created an atmosphere as if time had stopped. On her first visit to the house, Emma nervously fixed her hair with trembling hands. Edward, her future father-in-law, greeted her at the entrance. The man, with a sharp gaze and tightly drawn lips, looked her up and down, as if appraising her worth. "So, you teach art?" Edward asked during dinner around the table. "Not much of a living, I suppose." Margaret, her mother-in-law, made no attempt to ease the tension, letting out a small sigh. "James, you are the heir to this house. Don't forget your responsibility to uphold our traditions." Margaret was a central figure in social circles and managed many of the town's charitable activities. Her words always contained both sweetness and thorns. With her perfectly styled silver hair and pearl necklace, she embodied upper-class elegance. Her brother-in-law, Thomas, and his wife, Laura, were both cold-natured. Thomas supported the company as the sales director of Carter Real Estate, while Laura came from a local prestigious family and always maintained a haughty attitude. They already had 2 children. "In the Carter family, it's tradition to have children promptly after marriage," Margaret said while looking at Emma's wedding ring. "Especially the wife of the eldest son has the responsibility to produce a male heir." Just a few months into her marriage, Emma began to feel the pressure. James was busy with work, and she tried to adjust to her new environment while teaching children at a small art studio. Her heart was gradually wounded each time her mother-in-law asked, "Not yet?" During dinner, a year passed, and there were still no signs of pregnancy. Into the 2nd year, Emma began visiting a fertility clinic. The pain of hormone injections, the despair with each failure, and above all, the cold stares from her in-laws tormented her. "There can't be anything wrong with my son," Margaret would say whenever she saw Emma at social gatherings. "Carter men have always produced strong offspring." Her sister-in-law, Laura, deliberately doted on her children in front of Emma and talked eloquently about the joy of motherhood, always adding, "But you wouldn't understand." In the winter of their 3rd year of marriage, when Emma finally received news of her pregnancy, she called James in tears. His response was a curt, "That's good. I'll let father and everyone know." At the dinner held at the Carter home, Edward finally gave Emma a genuine smile. "At last, we have an heir to our family," he said, raising his champagne glass. "Let's pray it's a boy." Even after learning of her pregnancy, Emma still had no place of her own. Margaret said, "Since you probably can't cook regular meals anymore," and sent a housekeeper 3 times a week. It appeared to be a kind gesture, but in reality, it meant she didn't trust Emma's cooking skills. Laura advised, "Pregnant women tend to gain weight, so you'd better be careful," constantly monitoring changes in her figure. James immersed himself in work and behaved as if Emma's pregnancy was his own achievement. He gradually came home later, and conversations with Emma decreased. When she complained about feeling unwell, he would only say, "Having a boy is just that demanding." When she reached 6 months of pregnancy and was told by the town's obstetrician, "Your child is a girl," Emma had mixed feelings. Her love for the baby coming into the world mingled with anxiety about not meeting her in-laws' expectations. When she conveyed this news to James, his face clouded for a moment, but he said, "We'll have a boy next time." The dinner atmosphere froze when the gender was announced to the Carter family. Edward merely said, "HM." Margaret pursed her lips, and Laura exchanged meaningful glances with Thomas. From that night on, their attitudes toward Emma grew even colder. Her pregnancy was no longer celebrated but treated as proof of failure. As she entered the late stages of pregnancy, Emma felt increasingly lonely. James's business trips increased, and when he returned, he no longer touched her and began sleeping in a separate room. Her mother-in-law constantly told her, "Think about having another child right after delivery." One day, Emma accidentally saw a message on her husband's phone, "Can we meet tonight?" from a woman. Her heart nearly shattered, but she maintained her composure for the baby's sake. That night, she quietly began keeping a record in a small notebook. She started documenting daily events in the Carter household, her husband's behavior, and her in-laws' words in detail. When she entered her 8th month of pregnancy, Margaret called. "I've planned a baby shower for you 2 weeks from now." Her voice had an unusual warmth. Though surprised, Emma harbored a faint hope that this might be a sign of acceptance by her in-laws. "Thank you, Mother," Emma replied. "I'm looking forward to it." After hanging up, she gazed out the window and placed her hands on her enlarged belly. "It's going to be all right," she whispered softly. "We'll get through this, you and I." As Emma adjusted her pale blue maternity dress in front of the mirror, she pinned small hopes on today, the fact that Margaret had called her directly for the first time, the invitation card, with the message, "Let's celebrate a new member of the family." She had long wished to be accepted by the Carter family. She wanted to create a warm family environment, even just a little, for her daughter who would be born soon. 2 weeks until her due date, as she carefully descended the stairs, a taxi was already waiting at the entrance. James had left early in the morning, saying, "I'll go ahead to help with preparations at the venue." Supporting her heavy belly, she cautiously got into the car. "To the Carter Country Club, please," Emma told the driver. As the car started moving, she took the invitation from her handbag and read it again. Emma's baby shower, written in elegant script. "Is this your first child?" the driver asked amiably. "Yes," Emma replied with a smile. "It's a girl. Congratulations." "That's wonderful." As they approached the country club, she felt her heart racing. When the car entered the elegant circular driveway, several staff members were standing there. One approached and opened her door. "Miss S. Carter, we've been expecting you," he said politely. "Please follow me." Emma passed through the clubhouse entrance and was guided to a spacious hall. A sign saying "Special Celebration" stood at the entrance. She took a deep breath and placed her hand on the large door. When the door opened, her eyes took a moment to adjust to the bright interior. She could see people gathered at the back of the room, but something was different. The pastel-colored balloons and baby decorations she had imagined were nowhere to be seen. As Emma walked toward the center of the room, the conversation suddenly stopped. Then she saw a large banner hanging from the ceiling. "Farewell Party" was written in vivid red letters. She was confused and looked around. The Carter family, relatives, James's friends, the town's influential people, they all stared at her with perplexed expressions. In the center of the room was a table with small, organized cardboard boxes and stacks of documents, and James was standing next to an unfamiliar woman. The woman stood with a confident expression, looking down at Emma. "So, you finally arrived," Margaret said coldly. She seemed to have been eagerly awaiting this moment. Emma was speechless. She stood frozen in place, unable to move. James stepped forward, his expression so cold that he hardly seemed like the man who had been her husband until yesterday. "Emma, let me introduce you. This is Charlotte." He placed his hand on the woman's shoulder. "She and I plan to share our lives together." Charlotte gave a nasty smile. "Nice to meet you, Emma. I've heard so much about you." Emma felt the ground sway beneath her. She had to grab onto a nearby chair for support. "Your role is over," James said matter-of-factly. "Once we have an heir, you're no longer needed." Edward came forward and pointed to the documents on the table. "Divorce papers. The lawyers have already arranged everything. You just need to sign." Emma looked at her husband's face in disbelief. "This is the baby shower?" Her voice trembled. "Baby shower?" Margaret said mockingly. "As if we'd go to such trouble for someone like you." You were just a vessel to bear a Carter child. The room fell silent. The invited guests shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances with each other. No one attempted to intervene. You weren't worthy of this family, Margaret continued. Leave, now. Your belongings have already been packed. When the child is born, we will raise her properly. Emma took out her phone with trembling hands. Her heartbeat intensified, and she felt the baby move inside her. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. 3 years of humiliation, contempt, and struggle. 3 years of records and preparation, all for this moment. Emma slowly opened her eyes and operated her phone. Let's begin the real farewell party, she said quietly but clearly. There was a strength in her voice that had never been there before. When she pressed a button, the large screen in the venue suddenly lit up. It showed footage of James and Charlotte embracing intimately. The location was James and Emma's bedroom. The date stamp indicated 6 months ago. A murmur rose throughout the room. James stared at the screen with a pale face. This is just the beginning, Emma said quietly. Her lips curled into a slight smile. The farewell party you prepared for me is very interesting, but I've also prepared a special gift for you. She operated her phone again. The screen image switched, and this time it showed Edward discussing secret deals. The conversation included evidence of multiple illegal activities by Carter Real Estate. Oops, you probably didn't want the townspeople to see this, Emma said. Her face now showed firm confidence. People became agitated and began whispering to each other. Edward trembled with anger, and Charlotte anxiously grabbed James's arm. This isn't the end, Emma said further. She signaled toward the door. The door opened, and a man in a suit entered. This is my lawyer, and she waved toward another door. From there, several women entered. They all had stern expressions. These women are victims who were deceived by Carter Real Estate, and today they've all come to witness your farewell. Emma stood straight and looked everyone in the eye. Your nightmare begins now. The venue erupted in chaos. James stepped forward and tried to grab Emma's phone, but she calmly stepped aside. Don't touch me, Emma said quietly but firmly. Everything is being recorded. Even what's happening in this venue is being live-streamed. She turned her phone screen to show the number of live-streaming viewers. There were already over 300 viewers. When Emma tapped a button, another video appeared on the main screen. It vividly recorded Margaret berating Emma, calling her a worthless woman and a disposable tool. For 3 years, I've recorded everything, Emma said in a calm voice. How you exploited me, the abusive words. She paused and looked around the venue. Even how Edward deceives his clients. Edward's face turned red. Nonsense. That's fabricated. Emma smiled. Really? She continued tapping. This time, the screen showed Edward speaking in a private room. He was clearly misreporting property values and instructing subordinates to falsify documents. The audio was clear, and the content was explicit. This is from 3 months ago, and I have similar records for the past 3 years, Emma continued matter-of-factly. All digitized and stored in a secure location. If anything happens to me, they're set to be automatically sent to the authorities. Edward collapsed into a chair. Margaret stared at her husband with a pale face. And look at this, Emma said. Medical records appeared on the screen. James, you claimed that I was the cause of our infertility, but in reality, you yourself had a serious sperm formation disorder. The air in the room froze. James was speechless, and Charlotte looked up at him with a confused expression. The reason I was able to conceive this child, Emma gently placed her hand on her large belly, was thanks to a sperm donor, of course, through proper medical procedures. She looked at James. You didn't know, did you? Coming home late, every night, sleeping in a separate room. James's face contorted with anger. Lies. Emma shook her head. Not lies. There's evidence for everything. A DNA test would prove it immediately. The door at the back of the venue opened, and 2 police officers entered. Emma's lawyer approached them and briefly explained the situation. One of the officers walked toward Edward. Mr. Edward Carter, we'd like to ask you some questions voluntarily regarding allegations of fraud and tax evasion. At the same time, several local journalists with cameras entered through another door. They had already learned that Emma had started streaming and rushed to the scene. To the Carter family, Emma said quietly, you tried to expel me. You tried to erase me from this town, from your world. She stepped forward. But that's impossible. She approached the divorce papers on the table and picked them up. I will sign, but on my terms. She nodded to her lawyer. The lawyer took out another stack of documents and spread them on the table. These are my demands. A fair distribution of Carter family assets and sole custody of this child. She signed the documents. And I also request a proper investigation into Carter Real Estate's illegal activities. James came forward and angrily grabbed her arm. Who do you think you are? Emma calmly shook off his hand. The violence is being recorded too, she said quietly. Your reputation is already in ruins. Do you want to damage it further? The atmosphere in the venue began to change. The invited guests, initially confused, gradually began to give sympathetic looks to Emma as the Carter family's deceptions became clear. People's views of the family that had dominated the town for years began to shift. Today, I say goodbye to this family, Emma declared confidently. But that doesn't mean I've been defeated. It's the beginning of a new life. She slowly turned to face the guests. Everyone, thank you for coming to my farewell party. But actually, this turned out to be the Carter family's farewell party. Margaret stood up and said in a voice trembling with anger, "Get out, you disgrace to this family." Emma smiled, scan a QR code to continue reading on web novel. I'm leaving, but remember this, you thought I was just a tool, but I have something you don't. She placed her hand on her chest. Integrity and courage. As the Carter family fell into disarray, Emma quietly began walking on her way to the door. She paused and looked back. James, Charlotte, she looked at the two of them. You two are perfect for each other. I hope you can be happy deceiving each other. Then she went outside. Outside the venue, her best friend Hannah was waiting in a car. Hannah had been the only person who understood and helped with Emma's secret plan for the past 3 years. Did it go well? Hannah asked anxiously. Emma sat in the passenger seat and sighed with relief. Perfectly, she said. Their nightmare has just begun. As the car started moving, Emma gazed at the town scenery visible through the window the town she had lived in. The town under the influence of the Carter family. However, that power dynamic was about to change dramatically. Where to? Hannah asked. My small apartment first, Emma answered. But that's temporary. She placed her hand on her belly. This child and I have bigger plans. When the car left the country club, Emma did not look back. Her expression showed confidence and determination she had never displayed before. 3 weeks later, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her daughter Lily, a name meaning purity and renewal. News of the birth spread throughout Willowbrook and made the front page of the local paper, along with the Carter family scandal. Photos of Emma and Lily were published. The headline read, "A New Life and the Fight for Justice." She's a lovely child, Rachel Evans said, gently stroking Lily's tiny hand. She was the sharp lawyer leading Emma's legal team. In her mid-50s, with a keen gaze and refined demeanor, Rachel was holding a strategy meeting with Emma in her spacious office on the outskirts of Willowbrook. Thank you, Emma smiled as she held her daughter. She's my source of strength. The Carter family has started to counterattack. Rachel pointed to the documents spread across the table. They're challenging the legality of the evidence you recorded, claiming invasion of privacy. Emma nodded with a composed expression. As expected, but we have countermeasures. That's right, Rachel said with a confident voice. All recordings were legally made. Many of the Carter family's residences and offices were actually public places. Even the party venue they thought was private is legally part of a public facility. Furthermore, recordings regarding Edward's illegal activities are protected under whistleblower laws. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the office door. Rachel's assistant entered and handed over the latest notification from the court. The judge has ordered full disclosure of Carter Real Estate's books, Rachel said, reading through the document. This is a big step. When the trial began, the town of Willowbrook was divided into 2 camps, conservatives supporting the Carter family and reformers backing Emma. However, as evidence was increasingly revealed, the balance of support gradually tipped toward Emma. On a day when the trial entered its 3rd month, the courtroom was more crowded than usual. Emma was scheduled to take the witness stand for the first time that day. She left Lily with her best friend Hannah and appeared in court dressed in a simple navy blue suit. In the front row of the gallery sat the victims of Carter Real Estate. They all wore badges supporting Emma on their chests. Miss Carter, Rachel began questioning Emma on the witness stand. Former Miss S. Carter, Emma quietly corrected her. Those words carried the conviction of a woman who had found a new self. Emma, Rachel smiled gently. Can you tell the court about your experiences with the Carter family? Emma took a deep breath, and she began to speak about all 3 years, the cold treatment from Margaret, Edward's insulting attitude, James's betrayal. Her words were calm and clear. Rather than appealing to emotions, she simply stated the facts. And finally, she told what happened at the farewell party. They used me as a tool to bear children, Emma said. And when my role was finished, they intended to discard me. The Carter family's lawyer stood up and began cross-examination. He attempted to shake the credibility of Emma's testimony, but faced with her dignified attitude and consistent testimony, he couldn't develop an effective rebuttal. As the trial progressed, the full extent of the Carter family's illegal activities came to light. They had committed fraud in land deals, evaded taxes, and unfairly manipulated real estate prices. It was further revealed that after driving Emma out through divorce, they even had plans to forcibly evict her from her apartment. They had the entire town under their control, Emma stated in another inquiry. No one could speak up. I stood up for those without a voice. In the courthouse hallways, there were occasional arguments between Carter family supporters and Emma's supporters. However, in the face of the weight of evidence, public opinion rapidly shifted toward Emma. The turning point in the trial came on the day James took the witness stand. He appeared in court with an exhausted expression. Charlotte was no longer by his side. After the scandal came to light, she had quickly disappeared. Mr. Carter, the prosecutor asked, you deceived your wife, insulted her, and finally tried to humiliate her in public. Why? After a long silence, James squeezed out his voice. It was my father's instructions, he finally admitted. To preserve the family tradition, my father orchestrated everything. His confession shocked the courtroom. Edward shook his head vigorously, and Margaret covered her face with her hands. Did you ever love Emma? The prosecutor asked finally. James silently stared at Emma. In his eyes, deep regret had replaced the former arrogance. At first, he said in a small voice, but the family expectations broke me. You broke yourself, Emma said quietly. There was no anger in her voice, just a stillness confirming the truth. On the day the trial entered its final phase, Emma appeared in court holding her daughter. Lily was already 6 months old and had bright eyes just like her mother. When the judge turned to Emma, she stood up and walked forward confidently. Your Honor, Emma said quietly, throughout this trial I have sought justice, but at the same time I'm thinking about the future. She gently drew Lily closer. The world this child grows up in should not be one where the strong dominate the weak. It should be a world where the values of fairness and compassion are recognized. On the day of the verdict, the courtroom was overflowing with people. When the judge handed down a harsh judgment against the Carter family, a breath of relief escaped from the gallery. In the divorce suit against Emma Carter, now Emma West, the court recognizes her sole custody and orders 40% of Carter real estate shares and appropriate property division, the judge said. Furthermore, the investigation into Carter real estate's illegal activities will continue, with the possibility of criminal prosecution remaining. Emma quietly nodded. Her battle was coming to a victorious end. As she left the courtroom, she noticed James's gaze. He sat in a seat away from his parents, looking devastated. Emma, he called out weakly, can you forgive me? Emma stopped and looked straight at him. Forgiving and forgetting are different, she said. I can forgive your actions, but we will never go back. She continued, walking confidently, and left the courtroom. Outside, people who supported her had gathered. The sunlight illuminated her face and made Lily's hair shine gold. What will you do now? Hannah asked her. Emma smiled. Rebuild. Turn Carter Real Estate into a company that truly benefits the town. She gently drew her daughter closer and create a new form of family. Mummy, look. 5-year-old Lily proudly held up a bouquet of flowers she had picked in the garden. Her smile shone as brightly as the morning sun. Beautiful. Emma smiled as she received her daughter's creation. I'll display this on my office desk. The morning light illuminated Willowbrook's new residential area. This was an environmentally friendly housing community, built on land that Carter Real Estate had once tried to acquire illegally. Emma's house was surrounded by a spacious garden, featuring a design that utilized warm wood materials and natural light. "When you're ready, we'll go together." Emma gently stroked her daughter's hair. 5 years had passed since the trial, and the town of Willowbrook had changed significantly. The former Carter real estate had been reborn as New Hope Development, led by Emma. The company's policy emphasized transparency and community contribution, earning the trust of the townspeople. When they arrived at the office, they were greeted by a building that had been renovated from the former Carter mansion. Half of the building was used as an office, while the remaining half had become a support center for single mothers and their children. "Good morning, Emma." Janet at the reception greeted cheerfully. "This afternoon at 2, we have the opening ceremony for the community garden." "Thank you, I'm ready." Emma nodded. She left Lily at the in-house childcare center and headed to her own office. From her office window, she could see the place that was once the country club. It had now been developed as a park that the townspeople could use freely. She took a sip of coffee and remembered the day of the farewell party 5 years ago. Everything had changed since that day. The aftermath for the Carter family matched the pain they had inflicted on others. Edward received a 3-year prison sentence for tax evasion and fraud, and his health deteriorated in prison. Currently on parole, he had no trace of his former dignity. Margaret had been banished from social circles and was ignored by her former friends. She lived in a small house on the outskirts of town and rarely went out. Thomas and Laura divorced, and each left town. Laura remarried another wealthy man, but she had heard that Thomas was facing drinking problems and financial difficulties. And James, after the trial, his relationship with Charlotte ended, and he fell into alcohol dependence. He sent Emma numerous letters of apology, but she never wrote back. 2 years ago, he entered a rehabilitation facility, and she had heard that he recently opened a furniture repair shop in the neighboring town. Emma's thoughts were interrupted by a knock. The door opened, and her legal advisor, Rachel, entered. "The single mother support bill has passed the state legislature," Rachel reported happily. "Your lobbying efforts have paid off." Emma smiled, stood up, and embraced her friend. Our victory. That afternoon, Emma gave a speech at the community garden opening ceremony in front of the gathered townspeople. She spoke not about revenge, but about regeneration, about how to transform past pain into hope for the future. As the ceremony ended, and she was about to leave the venue, exchanging words with people, Emma spotted a familiar face in the crowd. It was James. He looked older than before, and yet somehow refreshed. Their eyes met for a moment, and he gave a small bow. Emma quietly nodded back and continued walking, holding Lily's hand. She didn't look back. She simply accepted the past as the past and continued walking toward the future. Lily squeezed her hand and asked in a bright voice, "Mommy, are you happy?" Emma looked at her daughter and smiled from her heart. "Very happy, Lily. We have a bright future ahead of us."